Okay, so here you can see I've taped off the drain. I've removed the tub spout, which strangely just pulled right out, no problem. Also removed the mixing valve handle. That actually had a little hex nut screw underneath it, and you just kind of turn it with one of those little Allen wrenches. That came out pretty easily for being as old as it is. Also, the shower, I just unscrewed that. That came right out, very easy, the shower head. And down here, I cut off the water supply here. I just used a reciprocating saw on that. And so the water supply is cut off right here. So anything from here all the way to the tub and the shower head and everything, there's no water in any of that anymore. I don't have to worry myself about damaging that and water leaking everywhere. But at the same time, the water is on. We do still need to use the house. So that's water's closed off on each of those. Here at the toilet, and then over here the two at the faucet. So let's get to it. First thing to do was to pry off the plastic surrounds covering the shower. Once I got them off, you can see here there's basically a wall of concrete behind them. So presumably the tile was attached directly to that. At some point, the tile was taken off and they put up the plastic surround. That all came off pretty easy. Okay, then I switch to the wall with the air vents on it, and I start to slowly begin the real process of the demo. So if you look closely at these walls, you can see that they're concrete and they've got metal mesh behind it, and then the metal mesh is attached directly to the studs. So the key to doing a good demo here is to smash between the studs. Be careful not to smash too far. But then to get your pry bar or your crowbar, and to get the crowbar between the wall, the concrete wall, and the stud, and then pry out. And your goal here is to kind of separate the nail from the metal mesh and the concrete and all the wall material. So if you do it kind of at that specific point, you're going to find it's a lot easier to get these off than just smashing away and trying to turn everything to dust and then cleaning it up later. Now, don't get me wrong, it'll still be very dusty and very difficult, but if you can take that crowbar and use that technique to get it behind the stud, to get it between the wall and the stud, and then just pry outward slowly, and you might even hammer down with the pry bar, like use a hammer to pry down with the pry bar, you can really get it off, and you can really do a pretty good job of getting it off in large chunks. For this section, I'm creating a horizontal line by bashing through the concrete because I need to find out exactly where the studs are behind the shower area. I don't know that. The only way to find that out would be to bash out a horizontal line, and then I can have an idea of how I'd pry out the concrete and the metal mesh by following along the studs again. Another great example of my pry bar technique here. Just get that pry bar in between the wall and the stud and try to kind of pry it, force it outward a little bit, just enough to separate that nail from the wall. And now we're back at the shower wall. You'll notice that I move back and forth a lot. That's to keep myself from getting too frustrated or too exhausted doing one thing. There's a lot that can be done here. So definitely if you find yourself getting tired or anything, try switching to a different part of the demo, and then maybe come back to that later with when you're feeling a little fresher. At this point, I'm going to use an even bigger crowbar. I think it might be 2 or 3 feet, but this is going to give me a lot more leverage. But I'm going to use basically the same technique to stick the crowbar between the concrete wall and the stud, and then just pry it, and you'll see I'm able to, well, basically get most of the wall off in one go. Now this is very, very heavy, So I have to kind of just let it fall. But this was a lot of progress in a small amount of time. Next up, I'll chip off all the tile that's on the archway above the shower, and that will reveal the concrete underneath, which is very thick and has that same metal mesh behind it. I know I've talked about it a lot, but I wanted to kind of provide a picture like a cutaway that I got to just give you an idea of how thick the concrete is, and then there's that layer of metal mesh behind it, all attached to the studs. So it ranges between about 1.25 inches to 1.5 inches, sometimes upwards of 2 inches in places. So yeah, this was thick. That extremely thick concrete was basically impossible to bash out of the ceiling. I just had gravity constantly working against me. So what I did was I went up in the attic and I used an angle grinder to make several cuts between the joists in the attic. So just make several cuts right through, and then the pieces dropped, and it made it much easier to pry out the rest of the ceiling. And now I'm back in the bathroom. The part above the V-shaped archway was too close to the edge of the roof. I just couldn't get in there from the attic area and couldn't access it. So I had to just cut and bash that out by hand. This part was very difficult. One trick I found that seems pretty successful is I use my small sledgehammer as a kind of pendulum, and I just swing it back and forth. And I'm able to get momentum going and then just smash and bash in the concrete along the V archway. And I was able to eventually get it out. It just took a really long time, and I had to be really careful because, of course, you don't want any of that concrete or that sharp metal falling right on your head. So I was always sure to never be directly under something I was trying to take out. Once I got the V-shaped archway down to the framing, this was about everything I was able to get done in one weekend. So I'll finish the demo in the next video. Be sure to like and subscribe. Thanks for watching, everyone.